On May 21st, 2026, the single most consequential line delivered by any Iranian official during this entire conflict was not framed as a threat. It was not presented as a declaration of strength. It was not the familiar IRGC language about crushing retaliation, surprise attacks, or catastrophic destruction. Instead, it came as a direct negotiating position. When placed beside the military messaging released by the United States during the previous 24 hours, the overlap becomes impossible to ignore. Every diplomat still believing a negotiated settlement remains achievable now faces a reality that is far clearer than before. Iran's negotiating team informed the world that uranium enrichment would not be discussed. Not now, not later, no compromise. The red line was fixed completely. That was the position the Islamic Republic carried into what had been described as the final diplomatic opening, one personally backed by 3 Gulf Arab heads of state, who tied their credibility to reaching a resolution. CENTCOM did not answer with a diplomatic statement. It did not release another carefully written communique. Instead, the response came through imagery. An AH-1Z Viper attack helicopter, the Marine Corps' most advanced shipborne close combat rotary wing platform, was shown circling an Iranian tanker in the Strait of Hormuz. Then another image followed. A B-1B Lancer appeared on the official CENTCOM account, together with information referencing increased sortie activity. At the same time, a B-1 test pilot stationed at Edwards Air Force Base disclosed that the Bone was now receiving external pylons designed for hypersonic missiles, for the first time in the aircraft's operational history. That point matters. The B-1B Lancer has operated throughout its history using only internal weapons carriage. Now the aircraft is being modified with external pylons, specifically intended for hypersonic missile deployment. Meanwhile, 12 of those B-1Bs are positioned at RAF Fairford in England. That force potentially represents more than half of the United States Air Force's mission-capable Lancer fleet within operational range of the Middle East, on missions lasting 37 hours round-trip from Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota with aerial refueling support. Iran established a uranium red line. The B-1B answered with a different message entirely. That line no longer looked like a boundary. It looked like a target list. To understand why Iran's uranium declaration on May 21st, 2026, and CENTCOM's simultaneous military signaling campaign involving the AH-1Z Viper and the B-1B are not separate developments accidentally unfolding on the same day, the broader operational picture must be understood completely. The issue has never been enrichment alone. It has always centered on regime survival. The new hypersonic capability being added to the B-1B changes the operational meaning of the targeting packages connected to Operation Sledgehammer since intelligence collection resumed during the ceasefire periods. The full operational picture on May 21st, 2026, emerged exactly 1 day after CENTCOM Commander Brad Cooper returned to Tampa. The movement followed the same sequence he carried out on February 26th, 2 days before Operation Epic Fury began. Iran's official position regarding uranium enrichment was delivered to negotiators with absolute clarity. Uranium remains. Enrichment continues. No ambiguity. A statement posted on X by the Supreme Leader, a figure not publicly seen in 3 months, and who may or may not be operating from the same underground facility network used by the IRGC since the air campaign began, described the conflict as the third sacred defense. That framing carries enormous institutional significance inside the IRGC narrative structure. The first sacred defense refers to the 1979 Islamic Revolution itself. The second sacred defense refers to the Iran-Iraq War from 1980 to 1988, when the Islamic Republic outlasted Saddam Hussein's coalition-backed military over 8 years of sustained warfare. By describing the current conflict as the third sacred defense, Mujtaba Kameh placed the present war alongside the 2 foundational moments defining the existence of the Islamic Republic. The framing is theological as much as military. Analysts who removed the softer diplomatic wording from the statement concluded the same thing. When the leader of an Islamic theocracy labels a military conflict a sacred defense, the implication is that the war becomes a religious obligation. Such a conflict cannot conclude through the type of material concessions diplomacy normally requires. A sacred defense is not negotiated to an end. It continues until the opposing side yields or until resistance becomes impossible. That framing came from a man unseen for 3 months except through X posts generated from somewhere inside the underground facility system. The WC-135R Constant Phoenix has been attempting to locate through atmospheric radiation tracking. That alone defines how much negotiating room exists regarding the nuclear concessions demanded by the Trump administration. The available space is 0. The CENTCOM imagery campaign must also be understood for what it is. This represents a specific form of psychological warfare operating in the gap between diplomacy and potential military escalation. The AH-1Z Viper image was posted deliberately. A marine attack helicopter is not randomly photographed circling an Iranian tanker in the Strait of Hormuz and then uploaded to the official social media account of a United States military command without strategic intent behind it. Every public image released by CENTCOM carries messaging directed toward multiple audiences simultaneously. For Iran's military leadership, the AH-1Z imagery signals that American naval forces in the Strait possess ship-launched close combat rotary wing capability specifically designed to counter the IRGC's remaining asymmetric naval weapon, the Fast Attack Boat Force. For the commercial shipping industry, the image communicates that United States naval patrol operations inside the Strait remain active, and that blockade enforcement has not relaxed during the diplomatic window. For the American domestic audience, the imagery presents visible operational control without requiring a politically costly announcement of offensive military action. And for the 90 ships already redirected, the message is even more direct. The AH-1 Zaid Viper is the platform any additional vessel attempting to challenge blockade enforcement is likely to encounter before reaching a position where it can matter operationally. CENTCOM confirmed on May 20th that 90 commercial ships had already been redirected, while 4 had been disabled. The B-1B Lancer imagery released after the Viper post communicated something entirely different. This was not about blockade defense. It concerned offensive strike capability tied to the next phase of operations. Posting a B-1B together with information regarding increased sorties around the Middle East on the exact day Iran declared uranium enrichment non-negotiable completed a very specific message. The diplomatic route closed today already has consequences in the air. The AH-1Z Viper itself deserves closer examination because its deployment changes the operational calculations surrounding the IRGC Fast Attack Boat Doctrine in the Strait of Hormuz. The platform has not received the analytical attention its current deployment requires. The AH-1 Zaid Viper serves as the Marine Corps' primary attack helicopter and operates from amphibious assault ships belonging to the Wasp and America classes. Those vessels provide the forward naval positioning that gives the helicopter immediate theater range. It is not dependent on land bases requiring transit time before engagement. It launches directly from ships already positioned inside the operational zone. That reduces response time against fast attack boat formations from hours to minutes. The Viper's weapons configuration explains why IRGC commanders are now seeing only 2 or 3 boats per observation period crossing the strait, compared to the 40 previously observed before the conflict. The helicopter can carry AIM-9X Sidewinder missiles. Those weapons provide air-to-air and air-to-surface engagement capability with ranges extending beyond the point where fast attack boats can properly identify the helicopter as a threat before targeting solutions are already established. It can also carry AGM-179 joint air-to-ground missiles. Those precision weapons can strike hardened targets including coastal infrastructure, launch sites, and command nodes coordinating fast attack boat operations from shore positions. The helicopter possesses 6 weapon stations, 2 75-inch rocket systems for suppressing boat formations, and a 20mm M197 rotary cannon for close-range engagements against individual vessels. Its targeting sight system identifies and tracks contacts from standoff distances far beyond the range at which those contacts can recognize the helicopter as a danger. An IRGC fast attack boat captain moving through the strait sees the Viper only after the helicopter has already completed identification, calculated targeting solutions, and reached an engagement decision. The captain becomes the final person aware that targeting has already occurred. That information imbalance is the tactical condition responsible for reducing fast attack boat activity from 40 transits per observation period to only 2 or 3. The AH-1Z Viper imagery, released through CENTCOM's official account, served as a reminder to anyone still considering challenging the blockade that this asymmetry remains fully intact. Now the focus turns fully to the B-1B Lancer, because the combination of the Fairford deployment, the increased sortie tempo, and the revelation involving hypersonic missile pylons represents the most important operational capability shift of the current phase of this conflict. 12 B-1Bs positioned at RAF Fairford must be understood against the total size of the United States Air Force inventory. The Air Force operates roughly 45 B-1B aircraft in total. Normally, only around 50 to 60% of that fleet is considered mission capable at any given moment due to maintenance schedules and modernization work. That means 12 B-1Bs, gathered at a single forward operating site, represents approximately 40 to 50% of the entire mission-ready Lancer fleet deployed within strike distance of the Middle East at the same time. This is not a standard rotational presence. It is the type of concentration normally associated with the opening phase of a major sustained air campaign rather than a symbolic demonstration strike. The B-1B is capable of carrying between 74,000 and 75,000 pounds of ordnance across 3 internal weapons bays. A single sortie departing from Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota, the primary operational home of the aircraft, can reach the Middle East and return in 37 hours with aerial refueling support while carrying the maximum weapons load. 12 aircraft, carrying 75,000 pounds each inside a coordinated strike package, equals approximately 900,000 pounds of ordnance deliverable during one operational sequence. That tonnage provides the context for understanding what a renewed B-1B campaign targeting remaining IRGC infrastructure would look like during its opening hours. The Hypersonic Missile Pylon program is the capability shift that changes the operational role of the B-1B in ways directly tied to the current Iranian target structure. An interview published by the War Zone with B-1 test pilot Lieutenant Colonel Marcus at Edwards Air Force Base confirmed that the Bone is now receiving external pylons intended for hypersonic missile integration, as well as extended-range anti-ship missile deployment for the first time in the aircraft's operational life. Historically, the B-1B functioned entirely as an internal carriage bomber. Its variable sweep wing system, its comparatively lower radar signature compared to older bomber designs, and its operational doctrine were all centered around carrying weapons internally. External pylons introduce drag. They increase radar visibility. They also alter the aircraft's flight performance in ways previously considered unacceptable compromises. For missions the B-1B had originally been optimized to perform. The decision to integrate external pylons for hypersonic missiles signals something very specific. The target categories being prepared for now require strike capabilities and engagement ranges beyond what internal carriage weapons alone can accomplish against the existing Iranian target set. The long-range anti-ship missile, known as LRASM, carries a range of 600 nautical miles. The B-1B can carry 24 LRASMs internally with additional missile capacity mounted on the new external pylons. 600 nautical miles changes the operational equation entirely. The Strait of Hormuz measures 21 nautical miles across. That means a B-1B launching LRASMs against targets in the Strait does not need to move close to Iranian territorial waters. It does not need to enter the engagement range of the Noor coastal anti-ship missile systems positioned along Iran's northern coastline. It also avoids entering the air defense coverage, still potentially operational inside the coastal zones. The LRASM launches from 600 nautical miles away, navigates independently toward its assigned target, and arrives carrying enough precision and warhead mass to engage any surface vessel the IRGC can deploy inside the Strait or Iranian coastal waters. The hypersonic missiles assigned to the new external pylons belong to a different mission category entirely. Those weapons are not intended for surface ships. They are designed for hardened underground facilities, fortified positions, tunnel entrances near Isfahan, reconstituted mobile missile launcher sites, and IRGC command infrastructure that survived the Epic Fury targeting campaign by dispersing into underground and mobile configurations during the ceasefire recovery period described as reaching 70% restoration. Tomahawk strikes used during the initial operational phases lacked sufficient penetration capability to neutralize many of those hardened positions. A hypersonic missile launched from a B-1B at 600 nautical miles and traveling at speeds that reduced target reaction time to nearly zero changes that equation completely. The missile arrives at underground hardened infrastructure carrying the penetration and detonation profile required for the target. That capability directly answers the problem presented by the IRGC's current posture. The B-1B, equipped with hypersonic pylons, is the operational response to Iran relocating key assets into hardened underground positions during the ceasefire rearmament window. It is also the answer to a scenario the IRGC did not appear to fully anticipate, while calculating whether the ceasefire reconstruction period would provide sufficient protection before the next strike phase began. Now, attention shifts toward what Iran still possesses militarily on May 21st, 2026, because understanding the remaining threat environment matters just as much as understanding the American response structure. The IRGC Navy's surviving operational doctrine now rests on three concepts: speed, saturation, and ambiguity. Speed means using fast attack craft with low radar signatures capable of rapid movement that compresses American response timelines. Saturation means generating enough simultaneous contacts from enough separate vectors that defensive engagement systems become stressed even after surveillance networks identify the incoming formation. Ambiguity refers to the dual-use appearance of IRGC vessels, making classification difficult until weapon systems are visibly exposed. That classification uncertainty has been exploited by the IRGC since the earliest phase of the conflict. The Noor and Kausar coastal anti-ship missile systems possess a claimed range of approximately 100 nautical miles. A single launch position along Iran's southern coastline can therefore cover the entire 21 nautical mile width of the strait, while extending engagement coverage into Gulf of Oman, approach routes on both the Iranian and Omani sides. Truck-mounted mobile launch systems can threaten vessels throughout the strait without requiring the IRGC Navy to leave port at all. That is precisely why any renewed B, 1B, and B-52 targeting sequence must prioritize coastal launch infrastructure before American surface assets move closer into the strait approaches. Another development highlighted by Admiral Cooper during Senate testimony has received far less public analytical attention than it deserves. The IRGC's drone evolution accelerated significantly during the ceasefire interval. Cooper stated directly that the era of $35,000 drones is over. He described a new threat environment involving jet-powered drones equipped with advanced sensors, electronic warfare systems, and signals intelligence collection capabilities. That represents a completely different category from the Shahed 136 suicide drone swarms that served as the IRGC's primary aerial threat during the Epic Fury period. A jet-powered drone carrying electronic warfare and SIGINT systems is not a $20,000 kamikaze platform. It is an autonomous intelligence collection and electronic attack platform operating at speeds and altitudes that defensive systems optimized against slower Shahed formations are not automatically configured to intercept. Cooper also confirmed the IRGC demonstrated this evolved capability when it struck the outer perimeter generator at the Baraka nuclear power plant during the nominal ceasefire. The attack tested defensive systems, protecting the UAE's most sensitive energy infrastructure while exposing vulnerabilities and penetration gaps that the earlier Shahed-era systems had not revealed. The IRGC adapted continuously throughout the ceasefire period. The systems it would deploy during any renewed conflict would not match the same platforms targeted during the first 38 days of Epic Fury. Cooper's testimony publicly acknowledged that this threat evolution is real, and that American targeting plans already incorporate those changes into preparations for future operations. Despite those adaptations, two structural weaknesses remain vulnerable to immediate exploitation in any renewed American campaign. The first weakness involves the fast attack boat saturation doctrine itself, because such operations require massive coordination. Launching more than 40 boats simultaneously from multiple vectors demands functioning communications infrastructure, radar systems, naval relay networks, and command nodes capable of assigning approach vectors and synchronized timing to every vessel involved. Those systems have been among CENTCOM's highest targeting priorities since the conflict began. The surveillance and reconnaissance network built by P-8 Poseidons, MH-60R CA Hawks, and RQ-4 Global Hawks shows that the IRGC's remaining communications architecture, supporting coordinated naval formations, has already suffered severe degradation. A Mosquito fleet without centralized coordination becomes something very different operationally. Instead of a coordinated saturation assault, it becomes a traffic jam on open water. Fast attack boats unable to receive synchronized vector instructions from an operational naval command system become isolated targets for individual AH-1Z Vipers, rather than components of the swarm doctrine the strategy depends on. The second vulnerability involves the submarine base infrastructure built into Iran's southern coastline. Satellite imagery has confirmed underground tunnel facilities carved into coastal rock formations, housing both Ghadir-class submarines and fast attack boat shelters. Those underground facilities represent exactly the type of target category the B-1B's new hypersonic pylons appear designed to strike. No military integrates external hypersonic missile capability onto one of the world's most capable conventional bombers in order to attack surface-level structures that standard GPS-guided munitions can already destroy from standoff range. Hypersonic capability is not integrated for ordinary strike missions. It is added because the target list includes hardened underground complexes protected against standard conventional weapons by depth, reinforced structure, and layered shielding that only hypersonic velocity and penetration capability can overcome. The submarine facilities buried into the southern Iranian coastline match that target category exactly. Those installations are the reason the B-1B received its new external hypersonic pylons. Now, the broader strategic meaning behind the Uranium Red Line becomes unavoidable because the surface interpretation of Iran's declaration suggests only a negotiating position. The deeper institutional reading reveals something much larger. Mojtaba Kamina has not appeared publicly in 3 months. Messages continue appearing on X from wherever the IRGC has relocated him for maximum survivability against another strike campaign. The IRGC hardline faction, represented publicly by figures such as Galabaf, has concluded that surrendering the enriched uranium stockpile is institutionally equivalent to surrendering the regime's right to continue existing. From the IRGC's perspective, that conclusion follows a clear internal logic. The Islamic Republic built its governing identity around the claim that the revolutionary system protects Iranian sovereignty against American and Zionist imperialism. If the IRGC abandons uranium enrichment under American military pressure, it proves that American force exceeded revolutionary resistance. And if American pressure is shown to be stronger than revolutionary resistance, then the foundational argument supporting the regime's domestic authority collapses with it. The population enduring food shortages, electrical blackouts, unpaid state salaries, and the economic consequences of the blockade. Because the IRGC insisted these sacrifices defended revolutionary sovereignty, must continue believing the sacrifice carried meaning. A uranium surrender imposed through military coercion instantly destroys that belief for every Iranian citizen already paying the cost. That is why the uranium red line is not fundamentally about enrichment. It is about whether the Islamic Republic can continue functioning as a governing structure with enough domestic legitimacy to maintain authority over a population that has already demonstrated revolutionary scale mobilization once economic pressure crosses a critical threshold. The blockade has already moved beyond that threshold, but the same calculation contains its own contradiction. Rejecting uranium surrender and continuing along the present trajectory creates institutional collapse through a different mechanism entirely. The comparison with December 1978 has now extended across 82 days. Security forces that stopped receiving salaries eventually stopped fighting for the government withholding those salaries. That dynamic destroyed the Shah's security apparatus within 45 days. The IRGC's institutional survival logic created the uranium red line to avoid what it views as humiliating defeat. Yet the economic mechanics of the blockade are simultaneously generating the payroll crisis capable of producing the same institutional breakdown without another strike being launched. The IRGC has entered the classic trap confronting every cornered institution. One path away from collapse leads directly into another form of collapse. And the B-1B fleet positioned at Fairford carrying hypersonic pylons represents the American military answer to the IRGC effort to locate a third option where no third exit exists. Now, the global picture must also be understood because 3 additional developments are unfolding alongside the Iran crisis. In Nigeria, the ISIS operation remains active. AFRICOM launched additional kinetic strikes on May 18th, following the May 16th elimination of Abu Bal al-Manuki, identified as ISIS's number 2 global operator. No American or Nigerian casualties were confirmed. Secretary of Defense Hegst described the operation as a Tier 1 counterterrorism success and stated that the operator community tracked the target for months before eliminating him together with his entire position. The operation received almost no mainstream media attention because coverage surrounding Hormuz consumed editorial focus, and because a clear American counterterrorism victory achieved without American casualties does not align with narratives portraying the conflict as expensive, controversial, or ineffective. Inside the Nigerian theater, the operation has been none of those things. 175 ISIS fighters eliminated, the organization's number 2 global operator killed, follow-on strikes continuing. That model reflects what American power, combined with motivated local partner forces, can achieve when directed against a genuine threat without the political limitations that historically constrained earlier counterterrorism operations. In Russia and Ukraine, casualty figures emerging from Russian combat loss estimates have reached a scale difficult to fully comprehend. Since February 2022, total Russian losses have reached 1,980 personnel according to Ukrainian military assessments, including 910 additional casualties during the previous 24 hours. Despite those losses, the front lines remain mostly static. Russia continues absorbing catastrophic attrition while pursuing the same operational objectives maintained since the invasion began. Ukraine's middle-range strike campaign, examined in detail during the previous night's coverage, has demonstrated that the 30 to 100-kilometer logistics zone behind Russian lines no longer functions as a safe rear area beyond Ukrainian reach. Every artillery shell expended and every soldier lost in Ukraine represents one less resource available for future positioning against NATO. Reuters and 3 European intelligence agencies also confirmed covert Chinese training for 200 Russian FPV drone operators. That effort reflects Beijing's attempt to improve Russia's ability to convert remaining manpower into sustainable frontline pressure without directly supplying military equipment whose transfer would violate commitments Xi made during the Beijing summit prohibiting military equipment support to active conflict parties. And on China itself, a simultaneous 3-front strategy is unfolding with remarkably little comprehensive analytical coverage. China continues providing covert support mechanisms to Iran through systems including the floating armory positioned inside the Persian Gulf at coordinates accessible to IRGC vessels. China is also maintaining military posture preparations connected to potential Taiwan contingency operations. The recent RIMPAC 2026 exercise included the Nemesis anti-ship system and Japanese Type 88 missile deployments arranged specifically as Taiwan contingency deterrence signaling. At the same time, Beijing continues presenting itself diplomatically as a neutral mediator and peacemaker while all those operational activities continue simultaneously. That three-front strategy demonstrates China's institutional sophistication in managing the gap between public diplomacy and operational behavior across every theater where strategic interests are expanding. The same dual-track structure produced the covert Russian drone operator training effort, the floating armory deployment, and satellite espionage activity targeting NATO communications, infrastructure, while Beijing simultaneously maintained public summit commitments, supporting Hormuz reopening and rejecting military equipment transfers to Iran. Now, the overall trajectory on May 21st, 2026 becomes much clearer. Iran used the final diplomatic opening not to make the nuclear concession the negotiations were built to achieve, but instead to establish a red line. CENTCOM answered that declaration not with diplomacy, but with imagery. An AH-1Z Viper circling an Iranian tanker, a B-1B Lancer paired with messaging about increased sortie rates and hypersonic pylons. The distance separating Iran's declaration from the American military response is not a normal negotiating gap a mediator can bridge. It is a structural incompatibility between an institution defining its position as a sacred defense and a military publicly displaying the platforms prepared to answer that framing physically. The 45-day historical rhyme from December 1978 has now stretched to 82 days. The blockade's economic mechanics continue colliding against a storage capacity crisis at Carr Island that the uranium red line cannot resolve. The IRGC's payroll pressures continue worsening against hard currency shortages that sacred defense rhetoric alone cannot fix. Meanwhile, 12 B-1B Lancers remain stationed at RAF Fairford in England. Each aircraft carries 24 LRASM slots internally together with hypersonic missiles mounted externally for the first time in the operational history of the airframe. Those 12 bombers represent approximately half the mission-capable Lancer fleet within a 37-hour round trip of every target listed under Operation Sledgehammer. Iran entered the confrontation carrying a uranium red line. The B-1B response consists of 75,000 pounds of ordnance per aircraft, 12 aircraft total, hypersonic strike delivery against hardened underground positions, RASM coverage against every remaining IRGC surface asset inside the Strait and Iranian coastal waters, and 82 days of blockade intelligence collection, shaping the most refined targeting picture CENTCOM has assembled against the Iranian threat network during the conflict. The sacred defense narrative from underground bunkers, the AH-1Z Viper appearing on CENTCOM's official account, the B-1B fleet at Fairford equipped with hypersonic pylons, the uranium red lines and the operational response forming around it. That is where May 21st, 2026 has brought every side involved in this conflict. And the next 48 hours may determine whether the sacred defense framework produces a diplomatic agreement before the B-1B response moves from signaling into action, or whether the B-1B demonstrates for the second time in 3 months that sacred defense rhetoric and 75,000 pounds of ordnance per sortie are not equivalent forms of leverage. Stay with us for the next update as this situation continues developing across every front. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.